All right, thanks Ernesto for that introduction. So yeah, as you said, I'm going to be looking at status and trends of blue catfish and channel catfish on the lower Missouri River. Just a little intro. So the Missouri Department of Conservation joined the Pallid Sturgeon Population Assessment Program in 2005. This is in conjunction with the Missouri River Recovery Program. So Pallid Population Assessment version 1, not specifically a catfish project. However, we do use a lot of benthic gears, and we collect a lot of catfish species, or collect a lot of channels and blues. Objective 6 of the Pallid program was to document annual results and long-term trends of all non-target species. And I'd like to thank the Lower Missouri River other Pallid sturgeon agencies. So we had U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service of Pierre, South Dakota, the South Dakota Department of Game, Fish and Parks, Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, Missouri Department of Conservation, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of Columbia. Oh, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So the objective of this study was to examine catch rates and trends of channel catfish and blue catfish with multiple standard gears on the lower Missouri River. Looking at our study sites, so the lower river extends from Gavin's Point Dam all the way down to the confluence with the Mississippi. We broke these up into segments based upon tributaries, geology, just major kind of differences in the area. So for segment 7, the uppermost reach is Gavin's Point Dam to Ponca Bend. This is the unchannelized reach. And then as we go from Ponca Bend down to the Platte River, which is segment 8, we get into what's called the channelized reach. And the remainder of the river is channelized all the way down to the Mississippi River. Below segment 8, we have segment 9, which is the Platte River to the Kansas River. And then below that, we have segment 10, which is the Kansas River to the Grand River. And then we have segment 13, which goes from the Grand River to the Osage River, and segment 14, which is from the Osage to the Mississippi. So just a brief standardized sampling. So bends within each segment were delineated at crossovers. So basically at the top of this bend where the Thalwag crosses from one side of the river to the other, this starts your bend, the top of the crossover, and then the beginning of the next crossover is the end of the bend. 25% of the bends within the segment were randomly selected annually, so bends changed from year to year, and random samples were stratified by available macro and meso habitats. So basically, we always had, if there were channel crossover, inside bend, outside bend, side channel, we would try to get a sample in each one of those in a random location. Habitats were sampled according to the Pallid Sturgeon Population Assessment Program from 2005 to 2018. The 3 gears we're going to be looking at today are our standard gill nets, which were typically ran from October to April. We had 100 and 200 foot experimental nets with 25 foot panels of 1.5 inch mesh, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inch mesh. And we have a long-term data set of from 2005 to 18 on our gill nets. Trotlines is one of our newer gears. So this was standardized in 2010. Our trotlines are 205 foot long. We have 40 droppers with 3/0 circle hooks. They're baited with night crawlers. And then we get to our otter trawls. Otter trawls are typically ran from May to September. They're 16 foot benthic trawls with 1.5 inch mesh body and 1/4 inch mesh caught end. So just to start by looking at total catch by gear, this is for all random sampling. So total from segment 7 all the way down to the mouth, or to the Mississippi. We captured over 6,000 blue cats in gill nets and over 3,000 channel cats. In trout lines, we captured over 3,000 blues and over 3,000 channels. And then otter trawls, we captured over 32,000 blues and 46,000 channels. So I'm going to start by looking at some of our gill net data, look at some of the size ranges we collect of channels and blues by segment, and then look at some catch per unit effort and catch rates by segment. So starting off, we're going to start off by looking at the size range of channels and blues we captured in gill nets. So on the left we have channel catfish, and on the right we have blue catfish. We catch a pretty wide size range of both species with our gill nets. Gill nets captured channel cats ranging from 54 millimeters to 983 millimeters, or 38 inches. And blue cats ranged from 70 millimeters up to 1,452 millimeters, which is 57 inches. The dotted lines on the box plot, so the boxes are 90% confidence, and then the dotted lines in each box are the means. The means are fairly similar from segment to segment. However, if you look over in on the blue catfish side, there's no blue cats for segment 7, as we didn't catch any blue cats in segment 7 in gill nets. So moving on, looking at CPUE by year and segment for channels and blues. We have channel catfish on the left and blues on the right again. So the channel catfish on the gill nets below segment 8, which is Ponca to the Platte, catch rates are fairly similar. However, you see that black line with the huge peak in 2012 is segment 8. So it looks like there was a pretty good influx after 2011 flood in that segment. And then whenever you look at the blue catfish on the right, we see more of a incrementing CPUE going decreasing as you move upstream. So that blue line on the top is your segment 14, which is the closest to the Mississippi. And then as we move down, all the way down to the bottom of that graph, you see this black line, that's segment 8, where there's little to no blue catfish captured. There was a couple captures, but very few. And then there's no segment 7, which segment 7 is going to be left out of most of this analysis too, by the way. Okay, so now looking at channels and blues by segment by year. So in that segment 8 section from Ponca to Platte River, Nebraska, we see the channel catfish CPUE is definitely higher than the blue cats, as the blue cats are fairly absent from that segment. And then as we move downstream, get to from where the Platte River goes to the Kansas River, we see channel catfish and blue catfish are fairly similar through the years. However, in this segment, blue catfish were considered kind of rare until recently. And then if you look after 2011, the blue catfish CPUE running before, after ANOVA, there was a significant increase after 2011 in blue catfish relative abundance. And we move down to the Kansas River, the Grand River. Again, we're starting to get where blue cats are more abundant than our channel cats. And then as we move further down from the Grand River to the Osage River, even higher relative abundance of blues. And then you get down from the Osage to the Mississippi, and it's significantly higher than channel cats. Then when we look at blue catfish mean length by year, captured in gill nets, we're running a linear regression model. We found 2 segments. There was a significant increase and mean lengths of blue catfish captured in gill nets from 2005 to 2015. So these two segments, we don't have the last 3 years data. But anyway, we did find a significant increase in mean lengths for size structure. And then we run and the other segments were not significant, and there wasn't a decreasing trend or anything, but just not a significant increase. And then when we look at channel catfish mean length, again, running a linear regression model, we see a significant increase in 3 different segments, particularly from Ponca Bend to the Platte River, and from the Platte River to the Kansas River, and then also in the lower river section from the Grand River to the Osage. So moving on with trout lines, again, trout lines were standardized in 2010. So trout lines captured channel catfish ranging from 95 to 835 millimeters or 33 inches. So a little bit smaller than what we see in our gill nets. And blue cat lengths range from 95 to 1,000 millimeters. Again, a little bit smaller than what we capture in our gill nets. But still a pretty good size range. Again, the box plots, the dotted line is the mean of those lengths. And we see segment 8 is a little bit higher mean. However, there were very few blue cats caught in that segment again, and there were no blues captured with trout lines in segment 7, which is that unchannelized reach. And then looking at trout line CPUE by segment and year, again, channel catfish, so fairly similar. We do see some peaks in some of the lower segments. However, most of the CPUE is pretty similar between segments for channel catfish. Blue catfish on the right, we see kind of the same thing we saw with the gill net, with the blue line representing your lower segment from the Osage River to the Mississippi. And again, decreasing mean CPUE as we move upstream for blue catfish. And then when we break it down into channels and blues per segment, again, that Ponca Bend to Platte River, we see the same thing we saw in gill nets, where channel catfish are significantly higher than blues, and blues are almost are lacking in our data set. From the Platte River to the Kansas River, again, we kind of see that same thing we saw with our gill nets. Channel catfish were a little bit higher, and then following the last couple 3 years, our blue cat relative abundance is a little bit higher than our channel catfish in that section. And then we go down to the Kansas to the Grand. Again, we see that kind of same swap. The blues and channels were pretty similar there up until the last few years. And then we see again the last couple of years that blue catfish relative abundance is a little higher than channel cats. And then our lower 2 segments, which we only have data from 2010 to 2015, the Grand River, the Osage River, they're kind of similar, but the blues are a little higher in the last 2014 and 2015 years. And then you get down to the lower segment from the Osage to the Mississippi, and blue catfish CPU is significantly higher than the channel cats. Moving on to our Otter Trawl data. Again, we're going to look at some size structure and then CPUE catch rate data. Starting with our size ranges. So Otter Trawls, we capture a lot smaller size ranges of channels and blues. These are more in the range of your age 0 and younger juveniles, age 1s and 2s and 3s. And over 46,000 channels were again caught with Otter Trawls. Otter Trawls captured channels ranging from 7 millimeters to 767, 30 inches. And then blue cats range from 73 millimeters up past 1,000 millimeters. Relative abundance, when we plot year and segment on the same, it's kind of messy. It's highly variable. But if you do notice, there are some peaks that kind of follow from segment to segment. which is interesting. Could lead to understanding years of better production. But again, when we look at that blue catfish graph on the right there, we see that black line, that segment 8, which is above the Platte River. We see little to no age 0s and age 1s. Break it out again, Ponca to Platte. Channel catfish, again, even in our otter trawls, are significantly higher than blue catfish relative abundance. And then from the Platte River, Nebraska to the Kansas River, we see that same kind of shift where our channels were a little bit higher relative abundance than our blues. And then as we go past 2011 and the last couple of years, the blues are starting to swap and get a little bit higher than the channel catfish. And again, running a before after ANOVA, we found that blue catfish abundance was significantly higher after 2011. And then when we get to the Kansas River to the Grand River, again, not a whole lot to look at here other than the last couple of years blues are a little bit higher. We get down to the lower rivers, again, the last 3 years data we don't really have. Segment 13, that top graph, we're missing 2011, it was a high water year. And then we get down to segment 14, the lowermost river or segment. Again, it's pretty variable between years, but a lot higher production than some of our other segments. So in summary, blue catfish above the Platte River, Nebraska, we see age 0 juvenile and adult abundance is low or almost non-existent. The Platte River to the Kansas River, we did see a significant increase in adults and age 0 and juvenile relative abundance following the 2011 flood. Below the Kansas River, we saw a significantly higher abundance of adults compared to channel cats, and adult abundance is highest below the Osage River. The size structure increased significantly from 2005 to 2015 in segments 13 and 14, which were our lower 2 segments, which encompass from the Grand River all the way to the Mississippi River. And looking at our summary for channel catfish above the Platte River, channels were significantly higher relative abundance than blues. From the Platte to the Kansas, or segment 9, relative abundance was higher than catfish before and then trending lower than blues after 2011. We did see a size structure increase significantly from 2005 to 2018 in segments 8 and 9, which is from the Ponca Bend to the Kansas River, and 2005 to 2015 in segment 13, which is from the Grand River to the Osage. So discussion, so I have a few questions. So basically, is the Platte River the latitudinal extent of blue catfish on the Missouri River? It's a little bit higher than the Platte River, but it's pretty close to right there, just above that area. Right now, this data, it kind of appears that way. In benthic fishes, they kind of found the same thing, which was a study done by Berry et al. In 2004. There's no barrier for 340 river kilometers to Gavin's Point Dam. Is water temperature, habitat, food, or spawning location, something specific to blue catfish lacking above that Platte River. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and I haven't really found anything that really explains it. And as big-headed carp's abundance continue to increasing upstream, which we do see, will blue catfish follow this trend and actually go above the Platte more. And is increase in size structure, is it related to big-headed carps or more our recent high water events? And then with that, I'll take any questions.
All right.